welcome to the AVID Vines first virtual champagne tasting. So we've got 19 participants, so we'll get started here in another moment, and we'll do some introductions. We'll open up a nice bottle of Carte Perle champagne from TIXIER, and we will get started in just a moment. We're joined, one of the elements of this afternoon is music by the talented Nicolas Deuson, who is playing music. There he is. Say hello, Nicolas. Bonjour. Allez. Nicolas is a local artist of classical guitar, and you may be able to persuade him to play some during the transitions of today's presentation. Wonderful, wonderful person. So very honored, very grateful that you are spending an hour of your time on a Saturday afternoon where I think a lot of us could have a bit of welcome distraction from what's happening in the world. And of all the, well, let's just call it a silver lining, that we're able to come together and have this particular event when we might not otherwise either have had the idea or done so with so many people. So that's the first bit of gratitude to start the hour. Let's just dive in, and we'll have others join us as they can. So, as I said, my name is David Affariot. I'm the owner of AVID Vines, and the reason why I started the company, which is a champagne importer of organic and sustainable champagnes and sparkling wines from France, full stop. And I started AVID Vines because as I spent all my life very much with an affection for and a passion for wine. I'm a French and American citizen, and we've raised 2 children in a household that has French in it. And I brought that to AVID Vines. But as I got older, I, who enjoy California and French reds and wines as much as anybody, started to feel the effects of the next day of drinking and having to take aspirin. This even happened last night. So last night, I opened up a bottle of California Chardonnay, 14.4%, just dove into it. It was delicious, but, towards the midpoint of the bottle, realized I need to be drinking water, I need to be taking aspirin, and I'm going to pay for this tomorrow. And sure enough, this morning, a little bit of aspirin, a little workout, a little routine, get the blood pumping, but not my 100%. And so I got tired of this feeling every time that I went drinking, or I had a bottle or enjoyed wine with all of its sulfites and so forth. So AVID Vine was born out of this idea of, can I bring in clean champagne, because I love champagne, and can I do so in a way that's organic, that doesn't leave the next day full of small regrets? And so that's what the champagne does. It's champagne to experience, and it consists of no regrets. I often say to people that you enjoy these champagnes twice. Once when you taste them, and then the next day when you wake up with no regrets, especially when it's not bumping your workout and your healthy routine that you've sacrificed and you've worked hard to create. So having said that, I do want to thank a couple of people. I want to welcome everybody for this wonderful liquid meditation we're about to have for the rest of the hour, and this welcome distraction perhaps for some of you. Many of you perhaps have had your workout for the day. Some of you have done some activities, are now easing into an hour where we're going to enjoy some absolutely wonderful clean bubbles, and we'll describe what that is in more detail in just a moment. First of all, let's not hide it anymore. Let's all open this bottle of champagne, and if you haven't already, I assume that all of you certainly have. Don't wait for me. Let's open this right now. I mean, enough. We've done the housekeeping. We said hello. Let's. Ooh, that's a wonderful sound. A wonderful sound. So, I'm not going to stand in your way before tasting this, but I would ask you just to smell, sip, and be aware. And let me continue introducing our participants for this afternoon. The first person I want to introduce is Samara Kaufman, the owner of Cinagro Wine Experience. For you Scrabble lovers, Cinagro is organic spelled backwards. We'll get into that story. Next up is Naina Bhedwar from Kesar Kitchen, whose talent in the kitchen has prepared a recipe that some of you have purchased already or obtained in advance of today's testing. and we'll talk to her about the food pairings of this champagne. As I mentioned already, is Nicolas Deuson on guitar, who will be playing some tunes for us. And then we also will be joined by Julien Tissier, the winemaker himself, from André Tissier, excuse, all the way from France. Now, he may be joining us a bit later. There he is. Salut, bonjour, Julien.
Salut.
Bah, c'est super, super bien. Voilà, tu te vois. Allez, bon, on retourne vers toi. We're going to return to Julien toward the end of the call. And so, everybody, thank you for joining. It's a privilege to do this with you. And let's start by, we've got our open glass of champagne, open bottle of champagne, and our glass are filled. Our hearts are full of gratitude. Let's jump right in with a conversation with Samara. And Samara, let's talk about Samara. By the way, if you can just give a little quick introduction to yourself as a registered, as a sommelier who's taken several exams and levels. If you can tell us which levels those are. Let's have a quick conversation about champagne and go through what are the ways that a sommelier breaks down the champagne category.
Absolutely. Great question. Well, first of all, welcome everybody. I'm so grateful to be here with all of you today. As David said, my name is Samara Kaufman. I am sommelier and owner of Cinagro Wine Experience. And basically what I do is I facilitate different types of tasting experiences for individuals in their homes, for corporations. I also partner with Cellar Filler and offer a natural and organic wine club, as well as a highly curated selection of natural and organic wines available through Cellar Filler. So that's a little bit about me and what I do. I have a unique background. A lot of sommeliers came to become a sommelier through working at restaurants. That is not my story. I went to Chico State, which is in Northern California, and I have a minor degree in viticulture and oenology through UC Davis and Chico State. So I'm a little bit more of an academic sommelier since I was trained as a winemaker for 4 years. In addition to that, I am certified sommelier, and I have a level 2 with the Wine Spirit Education and Trust. And so
Fantastic.
I think we're going to talk. A little bit about champagne. Do you want me to dive right in, David?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's talk about how people, we know that champagne is only champagne that is from France. It's the only sparkling wine that can call itself champagne if it comes from that region. Yes. What else? How does a sommelier come to this category?
Absolutely. First of all, champagne is perhaps, at least amongst my sommelier friends, the most beloved and most drank wine amongst almost every sommelier I know personally. And that's for a lot of reasons. And there's a lot of different ways that we kind of categorize and talk about and understand champagne. One of those is the location or the terroir, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Another is how the wine is aged. Another is how the vineyards may be classified. Another is the level of sweetness or lack thereof in the wine. And finally, the champagne producer, her or himself. So let's talk a little bit about, I'd love to talk to you a little bit about location and terroir specifically. So raise your hand in the chat if you've heard the term terroir. Either you've read it, or you've heard it, or even you've just been to the restaurant Terroir and you've seen the word in print. So while you do that, I will tell you a little bit about terroir. So terroir is a French word, and it really means an expression of place. And what it speaks to is it speaks to the climate, the soil, the winemaking techniques, and the grape itself. And the reason why champagne is so unique is because of the terroir, because you cannot have champagne terroir anywhere but Champagne. Right. And even more specific than that, there's 5 major regions, smaller regions within Champagne that constitute a variety of different villages or village. And the one that is where the wine we're going to be drinking today is made is a Montagne de Reims. And within that are a multitude of different villages. One of them being the Chauny-le-Rose, which is where the wine we're drinking today comes from. And some characteristics of that village or village are really around the type of grapes that grow best there. So all of Montagne de Reims is known for the Pinot Noir. They're growing predominantly Pinot Noir. They grow beautiful Pinot Noir. And what you'll find in this wine that we're going to drink today is the majority of it is Pinot Meunier. And that grape actually grows the best and the most, perhaps, within Champagnes-les-Roses. And so that's a little bit about the location. Now, aging, that's something different. How many of you have looked at a champagne bottle or even any sparkling bottle and seen the letters NV on that? That stands for non-vintage. So there's two types of ways to go about aging a champagne. One is non-vintage aging, which is the wine that we're drinking today. And that means it has to age for at least 15 months before it can be released. Now, if you have a vintage champagne, say a 2011 or a 2013, that actually has to be aged for 3 years before it's released. So that's another way we classify and talk about champagne. The third is how the vineyard itself is classified. And unlike Bordeaux, if you've heard of a Grand Cru or a Premier Cru vineyard in Bordeaux, that's actually a little bit different because that's not categorized by the specific village or village where that vineyard resides. In Champagne, it's based completely on the village or the village. So Champagnes-les-Roses is a Premier Cru village, so that's what we're going to be drinking today. It's a wonderful treat to drink a Premier Cru champagne. And then the last two, the dosage, that relates to the sweetness. So if we were to just make champagne with no added sugar whatsoever, and it would taste a little bit like sour lemon juice. If we use the method champenois, which is the way that champagne is made, it would taste like weird, bitter lemon juice. It would not be drinkable. It would not be a beautiful experience. Now, we have to add a little bit of sugar. And depending on how the style of the winemaker is trying to achieve will depend on how much sugar is added. And there's a little bit of sugar in there. There's a little bit of grape must in there that they add. It's called dosage. And so this wine that we're drinking today has 8 grams per liter sugar added, and that makes it a brut, which means it is a dry champagne, and it's actually on the drier side of brut, closer to extra brut.
Is that because brut Samara can go all the way up to like 13 grams, and this one sits at 8?
Exactly. Extra brut is like 0 to 12 grams per liter. So, or excuse me, to 12. And so that's why this one is really, it's much closer to the 12 than the bottom of this range. And then the last is the type of the producer. So there's 3 types of producers, 3 ways of classifying producers. One is Maison. And Maison, those are our big champagne houses. Those are a lot of the big brand names we know, like Veuve, Perrier, Bollinger, so on and so forth. And then we have cooperative. So if anybody is a big fan of Nicky Fu, that would be an example of a cooperative. And my personal favorite, which is why I'm really happy to be here today, are the vignerons. And vigneron is a French word for a wine grower, wine producer. And these are our independent wine growers and wine producers. And so the type, and you can see it, actually, I'll point it out on your bottle. So you can see right here, if you're drinking alongside us, you can see it says vigneron independent. And that basically just means that the winemaker, the wine producer is an independent. And so he has to have at least 95% of his grapes need to be estate. That means they are grown, they are cared for, they're all produced on the same property. And that's a really, really wonderful thing. That's my personal favorite category of champagne. So that's like a little bit about an introduction, crash course into 5 ways that we would classify champagne.
Well, I love it. Thanks you've set the table for us, Samara, and I think that's great. I want to make sure that also everyone, in addition to enjoying the champagne, is well hydrated, have a glass of water in between sips. We don't want to let it get to our heads too much. But, Samara, you did a great job of like breaking this down. And as we go maybe specifically into Champagnes-les-Roses and into Julien Tessier, who's a dear friend of mine, and the reason why I started AVID Vines. This particular champagne, as you mentioned, consists of the 3 magical grapes of Champagne, the ones that are the most used, and those are Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Pinot Meunier. And Pinot Meunier is often probably the least known of the 3 grapes, but it is the workhorse of the three, and it often provides the fruitiest expression of Champagne comes from Pinot Meunier. And then body provided by the Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, adding all that lovely acidity and structure to the Champagne. So, in Julien's terms, in terms of making these beautiful Champagnes, I have up here of all 5 that we import. This one just puts the gas right on Pinot Meunier. I think it's almost 60 to 65% Pinot Meunier. And the result is, let's just stop and kind of like evaluate one more time. The smell, the taste. There's some notes, and I'd love to hear you, Samara, break this down a little bit. But I get, if I close my eyes, lots of apple. I get a little bit of like rhubarb, and there's a pastryness to it. There's like a cobbler sense to it, and there's such a line that sometimes that can be described as something being fruity without necessarily being sweet. This is that example of fruitness forward. That is that rhubarb, a little bit of strawberry, a little bit of apple in it, and without being at sweet level. What say you, Samara?
Absolutely. David, I think your tasting notes are on point. You have an amazing palate. I'll talk a little bit about just general taste you might find in Champagne, and then about the specific bottle. So kind of some of the iconic tastes you expect to experience when drinking a Champagne are apple, kind of like a taste of toast, a taste of almond, and then also like a beautiful, beautiful creaminess. And I want to tell you just a few little things about the winemaking process that bring those flavors, and the reason why those flavors are in Champagne, what brings those to life. And that is because predominantly, at least amongst the toast, the almond, kind of like what David was alluding to, that just pastry goodness really comes from what's called aging on the lees. And quite simply, aging on lees is really just aging on kind of the byproducts of the initial fermentation process. And so what that does to a Champagne is it creates a creaminess and a butteriness to it. A lot of Champagnes, both made domestically and made all over the world, are made in, or excuse me, I meant to say Chardonnays. My brain, only on Champagne today. Chardonnays are also incorporate some lees aging, which is why they sometimes get some of those notes as well. And so in this particular bottle, I get a lot of green apple specifically, not as much the red, the Gala, the Pink Lady, not those sweeter apples, because there is this really gorgeous tart note that I think you hit really well with the rhubarb. It has this fruitiness, this lightness to it, but then it also has this really beautiful, perfectly balanced tartness to it, which is so beautiful. I get a lot of almond on this wine. I love almond in wine. To me, that's kind of like this nuttiness and this creaminess. And I do get a little bit of freshly baked pastry here, or maybe even a little bit of puff pastry, which is oftentimes very buttery, but a little bit lighter than a traditional pastry dough would be. So those are some of my notes. And as you do your own pairing at home, or enjoy what Chef Naina made, one thing I do want to tell you about Champagne and tasting is that my perfect pairing with Champagne is fried food. And the reason why is because Champagne is perhaps the most acidic wine. And the acidity of a Champagne will actually take any buttery, fatty, savory flavor and kind of spread it around your palate and help you enjoy it longer. It helps you savor what you're eating. And that is something that is so beautiful about this. And I find this, I love the Carte Perle. I think it's so beautiful. And I love having Champagne with fried food, because I think it's just the perfect pairing.
Amen. This, again, much to unpack with that. It's such Champagne for me is liquid meditation, as I described before, but it's also the one beverage you take and it makes you present, because you could be in conversation, especially a good Champagne. If it's good Champagne, you could be in mid-conversation, you could be taking a sip. the effervescence, everything, and suddenly you are present. I'm here right now. This is where I am. And lucky me, I'm drinking wonderful champagne. But every time I drink good champagne, there's no thinking of the future or thinking of replaying the past. I'm very, very present. And a good champagne just kind of like brings you and holds you. Let's talk a little bit about, we've talked about the subtleties of all these flavors. And we've talked about and alluded to the fact that 20 minutes, an hour later, and the next day, you're going to feel quite fine. No one's responsible for what you do after you drink the champagne. You may go off and, consume anything else. But if we leave it to this, you're going to be feeling fine. And when we talk about the organic and sustainability that's used to produce the champagne, I just want to dive a little bit into that. You're going to hear today, and you're going to hear from Julien himself, that just what authenticity is about. And Samara alluded to this about from maison all the way down to the vigneron, the winemaker himself. For Julien and for André Tessier champagnes, there isn't a grape that's purchased from anywhere else that goes into this wine, that goes into this champagne. It is all handmade. It is all hand harvested. There's no heavy machinery in the vineyard. There's no chemicals used in the pesticides or in the soil that leach in. There's no spray. There's no chemicals that are sprayed on the vines themselves in order to keep what is a certified organic method of production that Julien Tessier and André Tessier wines have achieved. We'll go through that in a moment. But as an importer, all these subtleties of doing it organically, doing it with sustainable methods, and preserving the wine can oftentimes be lost when the champagne gets in a crate, gets thrown onto a ship, goes across the Atlantic, and at certain times of the year, 6 months out of the year, can sometimes bake at 30 degrees above normal for temperatures in the summer, or freeze at 30 degrees below normal in the winter, and affect the wine. You couldn't not be affected by that. The shock of all of those temperature fluctuations does dull a wine, and certainly dulls the subtlety of doing things organically. It's explained by the fact that the wine, wherever you go, never tastes as good, never tastes as good as when you're there at the vineyard. We could be traveling in Tuscany in Italy, we could be in Provence in France, we could be in France in Champagne, and we have these wonderful memories because when we were there, it tasted so amazing. And it's not just because we were on this fabulous voyage and on a vacation in the frame of mind to enjoy it. Literally it tastes better because the wine has traveled less. And at AVID Vines, I've set all this up to say that we refrigerate all the champagne that comes from the vineyards and the producers that we use, like André Tessier. And on these refrigerated containers, the product is stable. And when it's stable, it's not going through these fluctuations. There aren't the need for additional sulfites added to the champagne or the product. And the result is this cleanliness. You'd think sometimes I'd cure people of their histamines by saying, oh, I don't drink champagne because the bubbles, the headaches. That doesn't happen when you're drinking with this because of the way we import it. And that level of, that just makes the cleanliness of the wine come through because it's not, and even more importantly, it collapses the distance. You and I are right now with Julien at the vineyard drinking his champagne. It's the same taste, which is a point of pride. It's more expensive to do it. And that's why only 5% of all the wine from Europe to the US is shipped in refrigerated containers. Add to that, there's only about 5% of Premier Cru that is sent to the US. So the rest of it is consumed all over the world. So we're really in rarefied air here when we're drinking this Premier Cru organic champagne from André Tessier. And that's what I think, I just wanted to add as a footnote to everything, Samara, that you shared with us, which is absolutely wonderful. This actually is a great segue. It's a great segue. We've mentioned Julien several times. I think it's time to kind of bring us to a point where we can actually talk about collapsing distance. Let's go to the vineyard in France, where Julien has created a tour for us, and he's going to walk us through the caves, the cellars of André Tessier Champagne. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to transition to really two videos. The first video I'm going to show you is the recent harvest, the harvest video, which goes through and will show you the process of making champagne at André Tessier visually. It will queue up on some of the processes and the terms that Samara used in describing the champagne. And then we'll go right into the cellar tour. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. And if we get this right, everything will be great. Let's see. Okay. Nicolas, you can. So I love that. I mean, thank you very much for Julien for helping to film, produce, and put that together. It tells the story that's worth 1,000 words about just how wonderful the champagne is and how it's made. You get to see a little bit of everything from the crush, the harvest, the crush, to the measuring for the bricks and the initial fermentation process. It's just great. So let's make sure we fill our glasses here, and let's go to. You saw a little bit of Julien himself in that video. Now we're going to have a little bit more of an experience with Julien as he shows us his cellar.
Bonjour David, bonjour tout le monde. Aujourd'hui, je vous invite à visiter ma cave, le domaine Champagne-André Tixier et Fils. Je suis moi-même Julien Tixier, la 4e génération. Allez, suivez-moi. Nous arrivons à la première partie de la cave. Ici, c'est un petit musée. C'est les outils qu'on utilisait autrefois. Ici, au mur, c'est des photos de mes ancêtres. Ici, vous avez mon grand-père. Et autrefois, nous ramenions les raisins à l'aide des charrettes et des chevaux. Ici, vous avez Dom Pérignon et mon père et moi-même. Donc nous sommes dans la cave familiale, c'est une cave creusée dans la craie, ce qui permet d'avoir une température constante été comme hiver. Il fait toujours environ 10-12 degrés. C'est mon arrière-grand-père qui l'a creusé avec ses mains. Allez, suivez-moi, vous allez voir, nous allons voir une partie de la cave plus moderne qui a été construite dans les années 2000. Donc ici, c'est un lieu de stockage et un endroit où on stocke les vins de réserve. Vous pouvez trouver des cuves traditionnelles et vous pouvez trouver aussi les fûts de chêne. La particularité des fûts de chêne, c'est qu'ils sont fabriqués avec les chênes de mon village. L'idée, c'est de mettre des raisins de mon village dans des chênes de mon village. Allez, suivez-moi. Ici, nous sommes à 9 mètres de profondeur. Voilà, au dernier étage de la cave. Vous pouvez voir le stockage de bouteilles. Et ici, les différents modes de remuage. C'est ce qu'on appelle le gyropalette et le pupitre. Voilà, on a fait le tour de la cave. Je vous souhaite une belle journée, une belle dégustation et prenez soin de vous. Bye bye.
I'm glad we were able to have this chance to see Julien and to be able to see him in his in his element, if you will. 2 instances going. If you can pin my other one, we'll keep going. So this is a time where I kind of want to also turn this over to the second element of our time together. Is we've tasted the champagne, and we want to kind of pair this with food and understand how champagne alone is wonderful, but it soars when it's really done well and paired with someone else, for sure. Champagne is easily better shared, but it's also done well when it's paired with a wonderful food, and that's why I am pleased to be able to present Naina Bhedwar from Kesar Kitchen, and to talk a little bit about the inspiration that she had, having tasted the champagne, to present us with a particular dish that we, as a thank you, and the follow-up to this meeting, we'll share the recipe that Naina is going to describe. So Naina, please introduce yourself and welcome to our hour here in our tasting, and talk a little bit about what you prepared.
Thank you, David. And thank you, Samara, as well. This opportunity is really unique. I can't say that I've ever done anything like this before. So, and thank you for the support for the few of you who did order the dish that I prepared. When Samara first told me about this, I will say that she and I work together quite seamlessly. We have our own food and wine dinners that we, sort of a supper club that we put on every 3 or 4 months. And we both very clearly play our roles. I do the food, she does the wine, and we, communicate between us. And doing this virtually, normally, I will cook her samples of things and we go through it together and then come up with the menu. This was more sort of, a couple of emails, how about this? And I am quite proud of the fact that without any face-to-face sitting down or discussing, the puff pastry thing came into my mind, and that actually worked with the butteriness element of the champagne. So just a little bit about me. I run my own very small scale food business out of Decatur in Atlanta. And my mission, so to speak, is to demystify spices. So I am of an Indo-Persian background, both types of cuisines that use spices, more so Indian, of course, than Persian. And I really want to give these cuisines center stage. I moved to Atlanta 7 years ago from the UK, where I lived for many, many years. And certainly over there, curry and Indian food is so ubiquitous. As they say, you spit and you hit an Indian restaurant. And also over there, it's all about beer and curry. Beer and curry is the main pairing. Wine and Indian food is starting to become a more known phenomenon now. Going back, say, 50 years, it was virtually unknown to have wine with Indian food. In the last 25 years, we're now seeing vineyards in India which is certainly bringing up the kind of acceptability of those sorts of pairings. I think Samara very recently was excited to find an Indian wine, and this champagne, it's such an honor for me to be able to pair something like this with a drink like this, because it's unusual, but it really works. So the filling, the dish that I came up with today is based around an Indian curry called a korma, K-O-R-M-A, which is something that is quite popular in Indian restaurants and something that you're likely to see on menus quite often. There are different types of kormas, but the most popular one and the most well-known one is the one that comes from the north, which is a sort of creamy, light, beige, yellowish kind of color, and the gravy or the sauce is made, believe it or not, as Samara said earlier, with almonds. And almonds is one of the main ingredients that goes into there. And unlike Western cream-based sauces, which are dependent on heavy cream most of the time, this is very creamy, but it's also extremely light on the palate, similar to the champagne, because the cream element comes from yogurt and coconut milk, not from heavy cream. And you could actually make it without yogurt and make it dairy-free.
So, Naina, I have to just, this is so incredible that it's thigh slapping. It's, you can hear me, right? Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you eating it?
I am tasting it, and I'm telling you, it is thigh slapping so good. So I plated it. For those of you lucky, you know, and this journey really started with a restaurant in Dallas who a James Beard award-winning chef, Stephen Pyle, in his restaurant Flora Street Cafe, tasted the champagne and said, "I'm going to create a dinner around these champagnes." And he created a tandoori fish dish that I thought I knew the champagne, having tasted it with Julian. We've having tasted it on multiple occasions. When I had this dish with its Indian notes paired with the Carte Perle, it was like drinking the champagne anew all over again. And so that's why I was so pleased that you accepted our invitation and were able to create this, because I have that same silly grin from ear to ear on my face, tasting this all over again, because it's got everything that the champagne's notes were really about. It has that pastriness to it. It's got the sauce that goes with it is almost like an apple cobbler and a little bit of heat, that the fruitness, I think, attacks that heat, attacks that overwhelming flavor, and balances it, just tries to like catch it and then and work with it. I mean, it's just phenomenal. It's really
Thank you.
Oh, it's silly good. It's silly good.
Thank you. So to be put on par with a James Beard restaurant chef is a supreme honor.
It's so good. It's an embarrassment. It's so good.
Yes, I know Naina would never say this herself, and I've told her this over and over and over again. I think by far and away, Naina makes, by miles, the best Indian and Middle Eastern food that I've ever had in the city of Atlanta. She's so talented, and this dish is so incredible. So incredible.
So to the many who are joining us that were joining us that were able to secure in advance the her food, congratulations on the lucky few. I would say though, for those who are beyond Atlanta and joining us from elsewhere, find your favorite Indian takeout and consider. Thank you. We're getting some comments now too. Please, let's do a couple of things. Let's open up the queue, if you will, and raise your hand or enter queue into the chat so we can start to line up your questions, your reactions. But I'm already seeing some people who have done this. But again, find your favorite Indian takeout and try this experiment, at home, and just contain yourself, because walls may shake and plates may be knocked over. It's just an incredible experience. And why not? I mean, I've had Thai food paired with German Rieslings and said to myself, I will never have one or the other again alone. paired together, fantastic. And I'm putting on that same podium as Rieslings and Thai food, Indian food, and this champagne in particular. Especially the Pinot Meunier, the fruit forwardness of this champagne. You know, I would almost say attacks, but like hugs. It hugs what the heat and flavor profile of this Indian food, the curry, the coconut that's in here, and it fills in every missing divot or every small divot to make a complete whole that is really what you want when sommeliers you know, offer their wine lists and then help their clients their patrons at the restaurant navigate a menu. You want something that is, to the degree that salt and pepper enhance a dish, you want to be able to pair a dish with something, a wine that does the same effect, that fills in and highlights flavors and supports, you know, places where the flavor profile needs to come through to create this, really what we want out of our food when we're enjoying it and when we're present. When we're not eating for fuel and we're enjoying food for its pleasure, this is the effect that you want. There are times where we eat for fuel and that's grab and go, that's fine. But at moments where we're together and we're able to share and we're able to come and be grateful for the place we are in time and open up a bottle and share a meal, this is what you want out of every experience like that. And yeah, you know, it's good. Totally understated.
Thank you.
I got to take a deep breath because it really is that good. You know, and again, let me throw it actually to Julien. Julien, what was how you've been listening all along? We've shown a little bit of the cave, the cellar tour. Sorry for the technical problems there, but everyone saw it. A big cheers and thank you to you for allowing us to for making this wonderful champagne. À la bonne vôtre. C'était super.
Sunday.
Allez, bravo. So let's ask some questions, and anything that I don't get right, Julien will correct me. Samara will as well. We've got a whole host of people who can answer your questions. So Julie, who should we, what's our first? There may not be.
Let's call on Patty Dowling. Had a question?
Sure. Patty, welcome. Mate.
Hi. It's absolutely delicious. Thank you so much.
Absolutely fantastic.
We have a question. Why is there no vintage on the champagnes, or is there just no vintage in champagne? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So vintage champagne will have its year. And one of these that I have up here is the 2012 that's made by André Tessier. But the others are non-vintage. And as Samara was describing, it simply means that these are grapes from a multitude of years. And for example, the grapes behind this Carte Perle, I believe, are actually harvested from 2015. Half of it is from the 2015 harvest. And then there are some aged reserves that are added to it as well to finish it out. And one of the reasons why champagne makers will make a non-vintage champagne is to have a level of consistency year in and year out so that you know what you're getting in the bottle. And they can do that by taking great years and mixing it with these aged reserves that they have in order to keep that balance and fill whatever divots one harvest year over another may have with these aged reserves. And in the process, by doing that, you lose the designation to call it vintage, because in a vintage year, they say, forget the aged reserves, everything is going to be just these grapes from this year. Great question, Patty. I'm so glad that you're enjoying it too. That's fantastic. Yes. We've got a question from Jared, who's asking, what is the recommended storage for this champagne, and does it differ compared to others? Great question. Champagne should be stored at about 54 degrees, 53 degrees, which would be the temperature of your wine refrigerator, but not necessarily your refrigerator. Your refrigerator might be a little too cold, and so we want to place it in another place. Short of having a wine refrigerator, as long as it's cool and dark and with as little humidity as possible, which is often could be your basement areas, is the best. Now, champagne isn't necessarily something, there's people who have, and maybe Samara, you can join in on this. There's the fact of aging champagne once it's been released. I mean, if you are holding on to champagne and it isn't stored properly, you should be drinking it sooner than later.
Yeah.
If you want to lay it down in your private cellar, you can do that. But maybe Samara, you can add a little bit of flavor to the aging once you buy the champagne.
Absolutely. I really like the 54, 55 degrees temperature with very low humidity in a proper wine fridge, or just a proper basement cellar that is cool and dry. And in terms of bringing it to drink, I also really like some people like to put it in the refrigerator for 4 hours or so and then drink it. I actually like to dunk mine into an ice bath and then kind of let it breathe for about 10 to 15 minutes before I open it. Really the drinking temperature, because I know this question kind of also like, dovetails with that other question that a lot of people want to know, well, what temperature do I drink a champagne at? And really drinking a champagne, you really want to be in that 50-degree temperature. So like that, dunk it in the ice bath for 15 minutes and then open it up, let it breathe a little bit, and then start to drink it.
Okay,
did I get the question?
perfect.
Did I get all the questions? Okay, good.
You nailed it. Here's another question that's come up. I love this question, by the way. This question is, if you don't finish a bottle in an evening, what's the best way to preserve champagne overnight? Okay, so I've had a lot of experience with André Tessier's champagne, and I will tell you, it's remarkable. If you store it properly, it tastes as good as when you first opened it, and I kid you not. Some champagnes don't do that as well, but whatever, Julien, you're doing, it's fantastic. I pulled down from behind me one of the other bottles here, and it's the Blanc de Blanc 100% Chardonnay, but that's just to say hello, Chardonnay. Hello. On the top of this, I have a champagne stopper, and it looks like it's a plastic thing. You can buy it on Amazon don't pay more than $7 for it, right? It's got two little legs, and it has a rubber gasket underneath. And when you fit it on top of the champagne, and you'll hear it click, it's now holding the lip of the champagne at the top, and it's with the gasket preserved it. If you have this, you put it in the refrigerator and you keep it cool, hours later, and that's for tonight. So one of the reasons why we had this experience at 3 p.m. in the afternoon was, one, to allow Julien, who is in France now at 9 or 10 o'clock, to join us. But also, you've opened this, you put a stopper on it. You can open it up again at 7 o'clock when your evening begins, or you'd like to have dinner at 8 or whenever. You can open this and you'll hear it pop open again. If you want to go a step further, there's a product at many wine stores called Private Preserve. It's alarmingly and unusually light. It's full of gas, and it comes with a straw, and you take off the cap, you put the straw inside the nozzle, and if you put 1, 2, 3 short bursts of gas into the champagne, it's a layer of gas that's heavier than air, so it goes under. It touches the liquid. You can put this in regular wine or champagne, and it will be the layer between the oxygen and the champagne, and sit there. And then you can put the same gasket on top. Then you refrigerate it vertically, and it will be more than fine the next day. It will be as if there was no interruption whatsoever. So that's a great, great question. If you don't have one of these gaskets that are $6 or $7, you can use a wine cork from a red bottle. Very hard to put the champagne cork back in the bottle because it becomes really fat. You can't get that back in the bottle. But if you have a regular cork from a wine bottle or a white bottle, you can fit that in as well after you've done a little gas. Or just put the cork in it, put it back in the refrigerator. So those are some options about how to preserve what is otherwise fantastic champagne when you don't, and when you can't finish it all yourself. I mean, the idea is no regrets tomorrow, but let's not, we don't want to go crazy drinking an entire bottle by yourself, which some of us have done. Anyway, great question. Here's another one. What kind of glass would you recommend? So I think in the notes, I kind of suggested that everyone use a white wine glass, which I'm holding right here. Samara, perhaps you can talk a little bit more about glassware and some of the difference between flutes and glass.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you asked me, because this is something I actually have a very strong opinion about. So I'll just give you a quick little history about why champagne is oftentimes drank out of a flute. So the flute kind of came to be in the 1960s. Previous to that, champagne, was actually drank out of a coupe glass. If you've ever seen a coupe glass, oftentimes that's what craft cocktails are served in. It's kind of like a vintage looking, very small glass, but with a very kind of like wide bowl to it.
Like this,
and that's actually
right?
how I like to drink my champagne. So there was a movement to move to a flute, but it had nothing to do with the quality of the drinking experience. It had everything to do with aesthetics. And the reason is because in that small flute, you could really look at that amazing, magical little bubble of champagne bubbles kind of floating to the top of your glass, and people like to look it up at the light. And I'm all about aesthetics. I have a passion for design. However, I also have a passion for a high quality tasting experience. And you oftentimes with a flute, you don't get to experience the full aroma and the full taste of the champagne, because if you think about the shape of the flute, it's tall and thin. So within the shaft of the flute, you get a lot of there's not as much surface area to come into contact with oxygen. And as we know, that contact with oxygen and that warmth from the air is going to release that aroma, and it's also going to release the flavors of the wine for us. So I personally love to drink wine either like I am today in a white wine glass or in a coupe. And I highly recommend, if you haven't seen a coupe or gotten one, that you invest in a few of them and try drinking some of your favorite champagne, perhaps like the one we're drinking today, out of the coupe, and see how that changes your experience.
Interesting. Thank you. Thank you, Samara. Very, very interesting. Very, very good. So we've reached the top of the hour and gone a little bit past. There's a couple things that I want to end our session with. And it is always, we begin with a little bit of gratitude, and I want to end with some gratitude. And I'm showing here in my back screen all of the social media. Take a picture if you can. These are the social media addresses of all of our participants today, of contributors, I should say. Here's AVID Vines, Cinagro, Nicolas Deuson, Kesar Kitchen, and Champagne André TIXIER. So please follow us for more news and insights to all of us. We certainly are so thankful for your participation. In particular, we'll be sending out a thank you letter, a thank you email, I should say, for everyone who did participate. And the goodies that are in that are going to be, one, the recipe from Naina on how to prepare what is relatively a straightforward and easy dish, but so flavorful that we'll have the pictures and the recipe for that. If you'd like to donate, please, the only people really suffering more than restaurants are live musicians who just do not have the normal schedule of gigs and so forth to perform. So if you're so inclined, I know he would never ask at all. He's probably mortified that I'm even showing this, but you can Venmo, or you can send a PayPal for any amount to Nicolas. And Nicolas, thank you very much for joining us. Your gifts and your... Très bien. Ta musique nous a charmés et c'était vraiment bien. Merci beaucoup. Hein. Furthermore, the AVID Vines is also in partnership with the Giving Kitchen, where we donate before this crisis to their events, and we also make every portion of the proceeds that are generated from the sale of AVID Vines and André TIXIER go to support the mission behind the Giving Kitchen, which is to help service and restaurants and hospitality employees in the hospitality industry through their medical bills in case of emergency. So it's a safety net for the servers and hospitality workers in Atlanta, and it's a model that should be copied and hopefully spread nationwide. But that's also one of the targets that the AVID Vines is and does support. as much as it can, and that's at a given kitchen. One other couple of things to couple of things to mention is just what our next tasting will be June 6th, where we will be tasting the rosé. If you hadn't noticed before, when I look over the screen, the beautiful red bottle up there is our rosé, and on June 6th we will be tasting, the André Tessier rosé version. So mark your calendar, subscribe to the newsletter that's part of the AVID Vines website, and you'll be sure to get the invite to register for that event. Again, I do want to thank very much Julien and everyone who participated in this first ever event. I thought it went fairly well with some hiccups, but that's life, so you roll with the punches. Thank you very, very much. Let me kind of open it up. I'm going to look at the gallery and see everybody here. And we'll, if you have more questions, by all means, we can certainly ask questions. But let's also maybe even open it up a bit. I see all beautiful faces. I'm so happy that you guys were able to join us. Yeah, it's been a wonderful time. Yeah, it's great. Fantastic. I haven't been drinking enough water, but I'm telling you, the food, I mean, champagne has got, so I'll just riff here a little bit. The champagne is an acidic beverage. And why is it often that it's served at the beginning of a meal, especially in France? When you sit down for a meal, they will often suggest strongly that you open up and start the meal with champagne. What does champagne do? The acidity of champagne, especially if you've gone the whole day before eating anything, or you've had your lunch and you're ready for a meal, the acid in the champagne, when it hits your stomach, starts to churn your stomach. The stomach reaction is kind of like, that acidity starts to create, we all start to salivate in response. If you bite into a lemon, you'll start to salivate. When you drink champagne, you'll start to salivate. Your stomach kind of starts to churn a bit, and it's a natural way to kickstart the appetite. And so drinking champagne at the beginning of a meal kickstarts you into a, my gosh, I'm hungry, and I'm going to order, or we're going to turn this into a feast and over order. But it's a subtle way to kind of kickstart an appetite, to say nothing about an excellent way to pair with what are often appetizers, as Samara mentioned, fried or deeply flavorful before you even get to the full entree, or the plat principal, on dit en français. But anyway, that's a bit of the champagne and why it's served in the beginning of a meal.
Hey, David.
It's because of that acidity. Yeah.
If we have a hangover tomorrow, can we call you and complain?
Patty, if you've got the hangover tomorrow, I'm going to know that you started with the champagne. Goodness knows what else you consumed afterwards. So if we can do a blood alcohol analysis, then yeah, sure. I'm happy to take that one.
Patty, will you hold up your glasses for everybody to see? This is a coupe. What?
So the champagne down the stem. I don't know if you.
Those are beautiful.
That's really cool.
Beautiful glass.
Love those.
Those are like etched or something.
Absolutely beautiful.
Good job.
You're doing it right. You're doing it right.
We finished the first bottle, though.
Well, that's a shame. That's what we call a dead soldier when it's someone.
Behind you, Patty.
So can I ask you a question?
Please.
Okay. So with no celebrations going live anymore, like how do you see the demand for champagne?
Well, that's a great question. So in an era where we find ourselves, one of the hardest things I think that's been as an adjustment for me, and that I've seen with others, is the self-care. Your routine is completely changed. So how do you maintain a schedule of self-care? And part of that means having new routines for fitting in a workout. How do we eat right and not eat out of emotion from everything we're seeing on on TV or the news and so forth? That can lead to a lot of stress eating. How do we maintain? And I think putting that first, how do we stop from overeating or stress eating. It's important to have routines that take us out of our work or out of our family and bring us to ourselves to go and work out. And if you're going to create that healthy, responsible routine for yourself, then you should reward yourself for that healthy routine. And the best way, I would argue, to reward yourself is with something that's not going to knock you off that routine the next day. So I'm arguing that this should be, an organic, sustainable champagne, and it should be André Tessier. But even if it's not André Tessier, I think when we're done with this era that we're in, this virus crisis, we'll be done with this idea of eating for fuel and eating out of a bag or of a wrapper. And I know that brings in a socioeconomic, elements to this conversation, but we have to be more aware of the food we're eating, because the way it's all set up right now, calories are a lot cheaper than the nutrition, and nutrition can be more expensive. We have to figure out ways to, and if we can, eat that way, then we need to just avoid what are empty calories. And maybe I strayed a little bit far off from your question, but it's a bit of, I have a passion about this, and to the degree that we've done volunteer work in my family, we've done so to create and help urban deserts to give the capacity for everyone to be able to reach healthy and quality food. And the more raw that is, the more nutrient dense that food is. So, yeah. I mean, I'll put it this way. 2020 started off with like such high hopes, right? 2020, it markets itself. And then look where we are right now. It's just such a waste. But if anything, to find a silver lining in anything, I quote Napoleon, who said, look, I drink champagne for two reasons. I drink champagne because when I'm defeated, I need it. And in victory, I celebrate it. So,
yeah. Actually,
but
David,
Samara,
I could comment on that. I could comment on that a little bit just from the overall market trends. As I said in my introduction, I work very closely with Alina Breger, who I believe is actually on here. I don't know if she's still on. She is the owner of Cellar Filler, which is a retailer that I work in partnership with. And on behalf of both of us, I can kind of speak a little bit to the market trends that we've seen, because we've been doing probably 3 to 4 times the amount of volume that we had done pre-COVID. And we are seeing a lot of champagne and sparkling wine moving out the door. I would say that it's not necessarily greater than it was before, but in terms of the percentage of the wine market that champagne holds, which is champagne and sparkling wine, which is about 15%, it's remained pretty solid. So I think to your question, are people still drinking champagne? They absolutely are. To David's point, like, people just want to treat themselves. This is rough for everybody. We're all kind of stuck in our homes, and, some of us are scared. Some of us have family members who are sick, whatever your situation may be. We just want to find ways to have a little bright spot in life and treat ourselves. And I think that we are letting beautiful champagne be that. So we've actually seen an increase and not a decrease. So it's good. It's thriving.
How many calories in crack?
Samara, you're absolutely right. I am on, and thank you so much for bringing this up. It's totally true. We absolutely love it when people come in and ask us to curate some wonderful bubbles, and we are absolutely thrilled to see that it's actually happening. And please continue.
Yeah, I think you guys have said it. I think champagne is self-care. So that's our new tagline. Champagne is self-care.
At least our self-care.
Yeah. Yes. Well, we could go on and on, but in fact, I think it is time we wrap up, just to kind of savor this moment that we've had together and not let it drag too much longer. I'm so thankful for everyone who participated and contributed their gifts. I'm so happy that everyone who asked a question and who showed up today, whether you bought the wine or didn't, hopefully you walked away with something different and an experience, a sense of community, and a welcome distraction is all we were shooting for. So if you got it, great. And to all of you who had this experience, as I did, drinking the champagne, kudos to you for treating yourself right. And please follow us at avid_vines.com, at the others who will be mentioned again in the thank you email. To all of you, thank you for taking the time out of your day to come together for this. Can't thank you enough. and hopefully we'll see you in the future for another tasting.